okay, it's time for me to come clean with you guys because there's something I've been avoiding now for, literally for months. And I keep blowing it off and blowing it off because I wasn't ready yet. So let's cover this now. Let's go into this now. People keep asking me, what happened to the 4-liter Jeep build, the first engine job series? And I haven't been able to give you guys an answer because I haven't been ready to go to that next step. The plans were still a little fuzzy in my mind. But we're there now. So here's what happened. Let me give you the recap on this real quick. So my daily driver, one of my daily driver Jeeps, right? It's a 98 XJ, and it's got a broken piston skirt. So this thing knocks like crazy. I've been driving it for 2 years like this, just knocking. You could hear this thing coming from blocks away. So the idea with the first engine job series was to just take a junkyard core motor, strip it down, straighten out whatever's wrong with it, give it a freshen up, and then put it back together again with stock parts and drop it in the Jeep. And that was the whole scope of it. But what happened was, as I'm working on this Jeep, as I'm working on this 4-liter, I'm falling in love with this engine. I'm like, this is a really nice engine. This thing is beautiful. I want to play with this. But I don't want a hot rod Jeep, right? I don't want my daily driver to have anything other than, I don't want it to do anything but get good gas mileage, be reliable, not leak. I want the air conditioning to work. I want it to be smooth. No mysteries. I don't want any aggravation with this thing. I just want it to be stone stock daily driver. Well, that clashes with like these ideas that I'm having for this 4-liter. And that's when I stopped. So we got to the point, like I said, we tore it apart, saw everything was wrong with it, freshened it up, ordered the new parts for it to put it back together again. And then I said, no, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. So at that time, at that period of time, I was planning on bringing the mule car over here. I'll go into this in a second. So I was planning on getting the mule car over here and getting to work on it. And in my mind, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to set this Jeep up and I'm going to make it one of the engines that goes into the mule. Like you make plans, you have a project, you have an idea, and then life gets in the way and you get behind. So this was all supposed to take place like in the late spring. And here we are now, it's the middle of September, and I finally got the car over here and I finally got to working on it. It happens. Life just gets in the way. So that's what happened to that series. We're going to continue it, but it's not going to be the stock daily driver engine that we had intended it to be originally. Now, when we put it together, I will cover all of those bases, what would encompass a stock rebuild. But it's not going to be a stock rebuild, and it's not going to go into a Jeep. It's going into the mule. So to bring you guys up to speed on this, so we've already done an introduction, but in case you missed it, this is Mr. Belvedere. So it's an 1867 Belvedere, and we're setting this car up as a rolling dyno. Meaning that I want this car to be able to accept every engine and transmission combination in like the Chrysler universe with just quick in and out. So I want to be able to go from, let's say, a slant 6 to a 383 or 440 in an hour, with everything as wide open and accessible and built ahead of time for that accessibility. So everything will be held together with motor plates and quick disconnects and pins and so on and so forth. So from idea to running car, like an hour's worth of work. So this way we don't get bogged down with all of the typical, the typical engine swap stuff. In and out, with everything as universal as possible. So that's easy to accomplish with the regular Chrysler engines. Like for instance, we had the slant in there yesterday. I only have to weld 2 tabs to the existing K-frame that's in there to accommodate this engine. Simple enough. On the other engines, on our big block and the small block, we're going to use what's called elephant ears. And I'll do a whole video on that mounting system. But those engines are going to have elephant ear mounting systems. So basically they'll each be held in place, the engines, with just 2 bolts at the front that go to the frame rails, and then the transmission mount in and out. So the idea is to make it as universal as possible. And like I said, when you're talking about the standard Chrysler engines that we normally deal with, it's pretty easy to do. But now when you throw the Jeep in there, that's a horse of a whole completely different color, because the Jeep engine was never, or I should say the engine bays on these cars were never designed to accommodate that engine. So to give you an idea, this is how on the Cherokees, this is how these things fit in here. You've got the dent in the firewall for the back of the head, and then you come all the way to the front and you have absolutely like no room between the front of the accessories and the radiator. It's all completely jammed in here, which is fine for, you know, a Jeep, especially a daily driver, something you don't screw around with. But when you're talking about a hot rod engine, that's bad. You know, it's not easily accessible, and it's not easily swappable. So to make the Jeep fit in the Belvedere's engine bay, we're going to have to do some major surgery to the car. So the 4-liter is approximately 6 inches longer in overall length with the accessories on it than the biggest engine that would have been available in the B-body Chrysler, which would be like a big block or a 426 Hemi. The 4-liter with the water pump and everything on it is about 6 inches longer overall. You see, the Slant 6 was designed to be compact. It's got the shortest block that they could work with. In fact, that's one of the problems with the Slant 6, is that because the block is so short, the bore centers are very close to each other, so you can't really get a big bore out of these things. And then if you look, you see like they mounted the water pump alongside the block instead of in front of it, as we typically found. So the Slant 6, lengthwise, fits in the same place that a big block would. No problem. For this thing, you got to add another 6 inches. So that's what we're doing with this car now. The Slant fits in here with just welding a simple tab onto each side of the K-frame for the mounting brackets. So that's easy. That's very straightforward. But to get the Jeep in here, we're going to have to completely redo the doghouse over here. The transmission tunnel, this section of the firewall, is all got to get cut out and moved back approximately 6 inches. So that'll do two things. It'll give us the space front to back, and then it won't crowd the front of the engine, so we can get a normal radiator in there and be able to work around it. Very important. But also, it'll allow us to use the rear sump Jeep oil pan, because now these cars are all rear steer. So here's your center link. So typically, this is where your oil pan sump sits, and then there's a shelf that goes above the center link, and then, you know, the back of the engine. Well, if you were to take the Jeep engine and just drop it in here, that center link is right where the sump is. So by moving the firewall back, moving the motor back, I'll be able to use the rear sump Jeep oil pan, which is always superior. Rather than modifying the Jeep pan to fit the center sump, I would rather modify the firewall and use the rear sump pan. So that's what's got to be done there. But wait, there's more, because nothing is ever that simple. Along with the Jeep motor, I also want to use a T5 with that. I want to use a manual transmission. The T5, it's not the best transmission to use, but I've worked with them. I've gone through several of them. I know the transmission, and with the power levels that we're talking about with this engine and the weight of this car, which is very gutted, the T5 will last. It'll do exactly what we want it to do. It's a good choice for this. But I definitely want to use a manual transmission in this combination. The others will have automatics. Although there's no reason that we can't put a manual behind any of them, but for simplicity's sake for right now, the Slant and the big blocks that are going in here will have automatics, and the Jeep is going to have a 5-speed. So that brings us to where we are right now, and why I'm talking about this now, because I can actually start working on it, and I can actually start laying out the plans. So the firewall gets moved back. I've got to set this thing up for a hydraulic clutch. I do not know what parts I'm going to need to accomplish this swap. As soon as I know all of the bits and pieces that I need, I'll throw a shout out to you guys. Let me know what you got. I'll buy the parts from you. I don't want anybody to send me anything for free. I'll buy the stuff, but I'll need to know what bell housing, what flywheel, and so on and so forth. And the flywheel is important on this because I plan on using the Jeep with its factory fuel injection system. All of the other engines that I plan for this car are all going in with carburetors, but for the Jeep part of this, I want to use the factory fuel injection. So I'm going to need a flywheel that's going to be compatible with that, all of the hardware that goes around it. So as soon as I know what I need, I'll let you guys know and we'll go from there. It's a big project. It's a big project. The car itself, like I said, aside from the modifications, I need to go through the whole car. The brakes, 100% of the brakes are gone. In fact, like one of the front wheels was so locked up, I practically had to drag it out of the backyard. So I've got to go through the brakes on this car. The front suspension, the lower control arm bushings are toast. So I've got a lot of work to do to the car itself to get the car ready, and then in addition to the modifications to get that engine in here. And of course, because it's a rolling dyno, the cars are going to be wired for everything you can measure on a car. It'll all be incorporated in here. That is what happened to the 4-liter Jeep build. We had a little change of heart, a little change of plans, and it's going to end up in the Mule, and I have some very interesting things that I want to try with it. It's stuff that's like kind of like common and normal in the Jeep world, but not really done in the car world. The 4-liter isn't an engine you typically see hot rodded, you know, the way we hot rod them, that sort of stuff. So we're going to have a lot of fun with this thing. I'm looking forward to it. I get to learn new things. And to me, that's it. That's like literally the most important part, the most enjoyable part of this entire car hobby is to learn new things. And that's what I get to do here. I get to play with new parts, new things that I haven't worked with before, and learn some new technology. On a 60-year-old, you know, design, but just the same, you know, I've never played with one. So now we're going to play with it. We're going to have some fun with it. So that's it. My next step here is the Sawzall. I plan on using the first engine, once this car is back together again, the first engine I plan on running through here is the Plan Z motor. And then we'll probably throw the 361 in and the Jeep at some point in the not too distant future. But that's all like open. I don't really have a set of plans. I only have the general idea that we want a rolling dyno that's just like quick in and out. Oh, let's pull the small block out and throw the slant in, you know, an hour later, it's running. That's the kind of thing that I'm trying to accomplish over here. So I'll keep you posted as we go through every step of the way. And my next step here is to fire up the Sawzall and cut that center section of the firewall out and start figuring out how it's all going to fit together. So that's it. The mystery of the 4-liter Jeep build solved. We're going to have fun with this. I'll see you tomorrow.